See, sometimes the perfect solution reveals itself through the constraints. Maybe you don't have a lot of money. Maybe you can't afford to compete against the ChatGPTs of the world. Then build it with heart, passion, a mission. And remember that AI is making tech cheaper and cheaper for the most of us. So while it's cool to follow all those stories of OpenAI and who's going to be the $1 trillion AI company, let's bring it down here to practical terms. For RUTH to be able to spread its wings, the biggest barrier among most AI is, what do we do with that private data? We're arguing it over, we're suing each other, but in the end, as a startup, you think, how can I align my incentives? And what RUTH has done in stage one, we're hoping this will continue, is make this where you can just go in and not share any information at all. Because if you're a person under threat, that tech abuse that they teach about could come back if your identity is attached to what's going on. And think about it if you're an advocate, like a social worker, a person who works in an organization helping people under domestic abuse, human trafficking. What if their data was revealed and they're a large part of the early growth of RUTH? See, those under threat survivors, they need to be able to check out the stalkerware and be able to feel that they're not going to be exposed by taking that action. And unlike commercial security apps that collect user data, RUTH operates with zero knowledge architecture, meaning even Parasol Cooperative can't access that user information. And I went to TechCrunch Disrupt 2024, we were pitching there, and nobody I ever met would even dare think about not taking data. And the biggest block to getting into enterprise is that personal data, that privacy. And to get to work with governments, privacy is key. So let's listen to why that choice was made and hopefully why that will continue. And the thing that got me excited when I first met at your booth was that you're not actually tracking the user. Yay. Like, oh my God, right? No, but it's so, we're like, what are you going to do with that data? Well, we're just, fair use. It's that weird, you're using RAG, LangChain, AWS Cloud, just a really smart setup, but you don't, what they being the greater they, don't fine tune like they do. You don't update all the time. And last question is, where do you get some of the sources of information? Because this is such a volatile, space, to be able to get accurate information and be able to feed that LLM, which actually keeps it safer, doesn't it?
Yeah. So, when we first started doing this, we knew we didn't want to fine tune, because fine tuning requires a whole slew of updates, constant updates to be made for it to be more relevant, and so that it doesn't hallucinate. But even then it hallucinates quite a lot, because you don't know every possible scenario. And so having a RAG lane chain model kind of gives you that flexibility to not only update the information that it's referencing before it sends it to the LLM to kind of come back with the appropriate response, but it gives us the ability to update the research, right? So, and I'll talk a little more about that research, but Sandy's probably a good person to respond to that side of it. The research part of it is critical, because every day technology is changing and evolving. Every day there's new ways people are finding to abuse. There's, how do you train it to be trauma informed? How do you give it the right information in terms of the intersection of tech and abuse, right? Because that could be an evolving target. So to fine tune it would require quite a lot of resources, but also it wouldn't always be accurate, right? Because sometimes it just retains it in memory and it doesn't really update accordingly. So we decided to go down the RAG LangChain route for that reason, to give us that flexibility. But also, it's just a better model for right now until the reasoning models come out, which is when we'll likely start to use some of those as well. But a large portion of what RUTH responds with is a research-backed set of data, right? And Sandy, if you want to hit on that a little bit in terms of, just what research is out there and how we're leveraging some of that.
I think that what's important is that we use vetted data. Part of the what happens in the LLM models that people complain about, right? Is the garbage in, garbage out. If you're just constantly recycling conspiracy and all kinds of things, who knows what's going to come out. So we just want to make sure that it's trained using, scholarly research, especially on being trauma informed, information that's publicly available information from, national reputable organizations doing victim services work, things like that. And so far, um, we've just been getting quite a high degree of accuracy, especially even with resources that Ruth will give you resources for getting help in, Kandahar, Afghanistan, Algiers. We've tested it all over the world in kind of very remote places, and it seems to be giving like accurate resources and information. So
Yeah. And some of that is actually in the LLM itself, right? So some of that trained data that's available is from the LLM. There are certain resources, obviously, that we have as well that we've kind of injected into the data set for context purposes, right? But I think at the end of the day, when we started to figure out what it is from a survivor perspective you really need is, who do I call? I'm in this situation. What do I do? And kind of better understand their circumstances, right? And so Ruth was really trained to be that sort of guardian almost, to provide that. And to kind of circle back on your point about collecting data, like I've been in data for God knows how long, right? And I've been on the side of, let's collect every possible piece of information we can about a person so we know exactly where they are, when they are, and how often they go there and all of that, right? And I think I've come to the realization now, sort of being on that survivor side of the mindset here, is that could re-victimize people, right? And the goal for us is really to ensure we're not doing that, that we're not participating in that. And when you go to our site to use Ruth, we do not collect any emails. We do not collect your name. We even tell you, don't give us all this information. We don't need it. And when you exit the chat, the data goes away. We don't use that data to train. We don't use that data to analyze right now. We may in the future want to use it for quality assurance just to make sure that the model is responding the way we need it to. But there's different ways to capture that as well. So, AI isn't perfect. Ruth isn't perfect. And so we also provide a feedback form for individuals so that they can submit, information to us saying, hey, I asked for this. This just didn't seem correct. And you please fix it. And we do our best to try to prioritize those. In some cases, we can do it quickly. Some cases, it takes a little while. So it just kind of varies, I think.
and I think that privacy piece is, by far one of the most important pieces, because then you're able to actually give the context of what's happening without
Mhm.
fear of that information being in somebody else's hand or being used for other purposes, you know?
Yeah. And it's always the saying, right? In the tech world, if it's a free product, you're the product. In our case, it's a free product. It's just a free product.
Like,
You are not the product.
we're a nonprofit. That's the benefit of being a nonprofit, right? So
Yes.